Yesterday was the last day that one could qualify for the new Democratic debate that's coming up in September, and you had to have 130,000 individual donors, as well as meet the 2% in four qualifying polls. Now, you've heard me on here mention that I think Gabbard, along with Yang, are two candidates that talk about things, namely with her foreign policy, with him, the freedom dividend, that are not being discussed by other candidates. And because of that, I think even if they're not your top person, which they're not for me, but they're still much higher up than the other candidates, you should support them because the whole point of having a primary is a discussion of different ideas. So when you have a field where it's like what, four or five people putting out their own ideas, and then you have other individuals like Biden and Buddha Trash and Beto O'Rourke kind of roaming around hoping that their name recognition or the fact that their sexual orientation is, new or different from the other candidates will get them over the hump. It's a lot more productive to listen to the ones that actually are proposing something, and not just running for their egotism like the three I just mentioned. But the DNC decided, she can't make it. Um, I'm going to link you to a video by Jimmy Dore, and he talks about she has over 20 qualifying polls. Uh, and we've been over this before. The lack of transparency. They don't tell you which ones are qualifying. They also don't mention the fact that usually when you have the ones that are done, that are placed on TV, they're usually conducted by landlines. A lot of younger people don't have them, so they oversample older voters, which is why Biden is at like 30% in all these, because he's just like a name that these older people know of. But if you do one online, you usually get Yang, going from like first to sixth place or something. Just, it's all about the generational divide, and uh, not just getting so caught up in this idea that if a person doesn't make it in this poll or that poll, it's all over, which is what this debate threshold stipulated. And I guess with me, it's always been frustrating because when you have a criteria like meet 65,000 donors, that's a big deal because a regular Joe Smo who's just sitting in his house claiming he's running for president can't do that. Um, so if the threshold was just fundraising, which she met, by the way, I think several times over, actually, it was like I think she had 150,000 by the time the donor list was over, which is more than enough to qualify. When the number is something akin to that, you can it's fine. It's perfectly okay to say we want people who have been able to get others to donate, who have grassroots work, because it's a measure of calculating their success. Even though what's really comedic is that, from what I've heard, the only two candidates who actually have a million donors are Warren and Sanders. All the other ones have like 200,000, 300,000. Basically, even though they have higher name recognition than her, they're hated by most of the people that hear about them, or most of the people who hear about them are not of the belief that they have to donate to them. So they just get left behind. They don't give them any money, which is really comedic because I think it is a waste of time to give most of these candidates anything. They're not fighting for you, so why should you fight for them? Um, but let's go back to something I said a while ago, which was that the whole point of my opposition to joining the military, and more specifically my opposition to other people joining as well, is because I've felt for a couple of years now that the people who join and serve, when they come back from their little tours, get treated like garbage. You have 27% of the homeless who are former veterans, or rather are veterans who formerly served, and they come back and then they can't get any work, and then they get called lazy, and conservative pundits try to act like they don't exist, while telling you that Trump has done all these wonderful things for veterans for whatever reason. But that's a central point to what I've been saying, which is that they come back over here and they're disrespected by their non-serving Americans, while we're getting told by others that we should go over there and serve and join and all this other stuff, and it just doesn't seem like anything that's worth a damn to me. But for the few people that do end up doing this, with someone like Gabbard who goes and serves for multiple weeks of her campaign and then comes back and they tell you, hey, sorry, you can't make it to the debate. Thank you for your service. It's that same kind of thing. And, one might see this as me saying she deserves some special treatment. I think giving the circumstances of a country that says we want you to serve and protect us and all this other psychobabble, uh, basically telling one of what only 2-3 veterans running in a Democratic primary to go it's basically sticking their middle finger in front of you right when you come back from being overseas. I think there's a problem with that. And this interview I'm going to play at the end of this, where she's asked, will you support the eventual Democratic candidate? It's all the same thing. They never can just focus and stay on the topic of here's the issue. Here's you not making the debates. Now, what are you going to do as a result of this? They never can just stick to one topic. So that's why they have to ask her, are you going to support the candidate? Are you going to drop out to make the next debate? What's your thoughts on Gillibrand, I wouldn't be surprised if two of them only met one time the entire, or like twice the entire election cycle when they were on the debate stage together and for that little stupid uh, woman running for president picture that they left Williamson out of. That's it. They're not known for having any kind of relationship or interaction or specific campaign moment. Nothing. Just like this is what I'm saying. The media asks you these weird things that have nothing to do with anything. We've had what 5 people drop out, and you're just now asking her what you think about this one. What you think about any of them getting out? Like, why does that matter to her? It's not like it was a front runner like Biden or Warren. It was just someone who was at 1% the entire time. Someone who, unlike Gabbard, did not meet the donor threshold. Someone who, unlike Gabbard, did not get over 20 polls where she was meeting the donor threshold, the polling threshold that these idiots tried to say, oh, well, we don't count that one. Sorry. And people really have in real life, they've tried to pretend they don't know what I'm talking about when I say there are certain candidates who are needed for specific things. If I were to find out that Yang got denied, for example, I'd be pissed off because I want a discussion of UBI. And a lot of these debates are usually the only chances we get to hear some of these candidates talk about other things. Like I think he was asked about foreign policy in the second debate, and that was my point. That you have this one candidate with Gabbard who is talking about something that I feel has been completely ignored by the rest of the field for the most part, and also has been barely discussed at all by the media. Like, how many times do you hear anybody in that just through both of those debates? The only question I remember them asking about anything having to do with the international issue was Russian crap and getting back in the Iran deal, which would be a smart thing to do. But we actually have some candidates who are stupid enough to think they can get a better deal, so we can let them wallow in their own ignorance. It's just people don't get it. They don't understand why certain people are needed for things. Literally every single candidate in this field could drop out with the exception of Sanders, Yang, and Gabbard, and I wouldn't even bat an eye. Because outside of Warren and those three, none of them are doing anything that requires us to want them to stay in this race for any amount of time, and certainly not doing something to where if they get out, there's going to be some issue that's missed. I think Sanders and Warren are a little bit more real on income inequality. Sanders more so than Warren. And I just gave you the example of Yang earlier because I can recognize, even in being a supporter of one person over the other, the value of having multiple people in this race. But it's people that actually contribute an idea. What the hell is O'Dork running on? What is Biden running on? What is Harris running on? What is Buttigieg running on? I don't like none of these people are doing anything that requires us to even have them in this race. And you've seen Buttigieg just dip, 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 along with Harris, along with many of these other people. And they've met. It's like you just barely squeeze through, and the other person's trying to squeeze through, and they're like, "Nope, sorry." But I'm supposed to believe that a warmonger party who has had its own members smear Gabbard for her supposed ties to Assad, is so concerned and caring about having a discussion on foreign policy. The same DNC that laughed at Inslee when he said, "Hey, can we have a climate debate?" Like this is such an existential threat that we're not only not going to talk about it for more than 2 minutes on TV, uh, 30 seconds per candidate, but we're also going to not have a debate focused entirely on it because, why would we bother to do that? And I remember that Perez's, the chair, DNC chairman, his little stupid comment, oh, well, would have to make an issue for everybody. It's like, no, idiot. You guys keep trying to tell me that Trump is destroying the world by getting out of the Paris Agreement and having his stupid EPA administrator have a little dumb rule of getting rid of two regulations for every new regulation. But you're going to tell me in the same breath, oh no, we don't need a whole debate on that. But multiple candidates have put out their own climate proposals. So why would I not want to hear them discuss at length why one is better than the other? Like, it's so dumb. And it's the same artificial nonsense. If the US was truly a democracy that cared about, remember, we're bombing 7 countries, that cared about discussing these things at any length, we would have a foreign policy debate that maybe was over 1 or 2 nights, depending on how many people were invited. Gabbard certainly would be invited, just because she meets the threshold. Like you wouldn't have the little stupid threshold stuff. It would just be meet a donor qualification. There you go. Not, oh, if enough people know your name, you can get into this. It's dumb. That's really ridiculous. But she would get mentioned along with these other people, and they would detail for you what they want to do overseas, because we actually did see some disagreement here. We had Hickenlooper warmongering, we had Tim Ryan warmongering, and it's like these people, after 18 years in Afghanistan, after 5 years in Syria, after 4 years in Yemen, they still don't get it. They're still so stupid that they don't see a problem with this stuff. And look, I know this video is only going to get like 30 views or whatever. I don't care. I'm sick of every single debate cycle hoping that you can get your message out there, because what's the point? These people just cut you out and screw you over. YouTube's got the little dumb algorithm messing with my stuff. The DNC is trying to keep out discussions of foreign policy by kicking out the one person who talks about it the most. They don't care about having a discussion of issues. They just want the reality show nonsense that they supposedly despise Trump for. It's just them repeating the same stupid stuff. So enjoy the rest of this. We got this interview with her, and you can see her reaction and everything, and it's all been mentioned here. But I just wanted to include it at the end because this is my monologue of disgust. And in including this, want to remind you of who is one of the few candidates I would actually support, because they're actually running on a policy and not an ego.
I know you talk about this in very personal terms, your commitment to serving in the military, but I wonder if you feel like you lost any ground at all in the campaign by leaving for 2 weeks.
I don't know. It wasn't what was on my mind, to be honest with you. I'm back. I'm glad to be back, bringing the experiences that I've had back with me. And I'm grateful to all of our supporters who've been working really hard over the few weeks that I was gone, and came straight back here to Iowa, and we'll be hitting the trail.
Yeah, what are your plans there in Iowa?
We've got a number of events planned here in Iowa over the next couple of days. Headed to Georgia, where we'll be doing a few events there, followed by a visit to New Hampshire, and so on and so on.
So today was the deadline, as you know, to qualify for the September Democratic debate. And if things hold as expected, you will not be on the stage in Houston because you did not get 2% in 4 DNC-approved polls. What's your reaction to that?
Would like to have been on that stage, but that's not everything. And we're going to find ways to work around it and really focus on bringing our people-powered campaign directly to the people, connecting directly with voters, and continuing to do exactly what we have been doing in building and growing the momentum that we're seeing and the interest and support for the kind of leadership that I seek to bring.
What's your assessment of how the DNC did in selecting the polls that would be eligible?
I think the biggest problem with this whole process has been a lack of transparency in not being very clear and open with the people and the public on why certain polls were qualifying while others were disqualifying, even when some of the qualifying polls were less accurate than the ones that the DNC said were not qualifying. So I think transparency is the biggest issue that I think people are looking to the DNC to address, but also it points to the bigger issue, really the lack of trust that people have in their government as a whole. You know, people expect that their leaders and their leadership will be a government of, by, and for the people. And instead, what they feel too often is that there's kind of a small group of really powerful people in the establishment, and then everyone else is left out or left behind. So to me, whether we're talking about the DNC or we're talking really about the bigger challenge in our government, this is what's at the heart of the change in leadership that I seek to bring, to make it so that it is transparent and a government that is truly focused on being for the people.
If you fail to qualify for the October debates, will you stay in the race?
We're going to continue to work to qualify, but again, I am staying in this race, and whether we're in the debates or we're not in the debates, there are many other ways that we can continue to reach voters, and that's exactly what I'm focused on doing.
Earlier this month, you told our political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns that you would support the Democratic nominee if you end up not winning the primary. Is there any policy a Democratic nominee could hold that would persuade you not to endorse them in the general election?
No, I am, as are all of the other candidates that I'm aware of running for president, committed to defeating Donald Trump in 2020. I look forward and hope to be able to earn that nomination myself, but if not, then I'll join with others in making sure that that happens.
Well, you're facing a primary challenge back in your district, Hawaii's second, and it was reported that your campaign was in the red for the second quarter of 2019. If you don't win the Democratic nomination, will you try and return to the House?
Yeah, once again, I'm focused on bringing my presidential campaign to the people and bringing this message to them of a government of, by, and for the people, and recognizing that the most important responsibility the president has is commander-in-chief. I bring a unique skill set of experiences, both, yes, as a soldier, but really as a member of Congress, serving for nearly 7 years on the Foreign Affairs Committees, the Armed Services Committees, Homeland Security Committees, that make me equipped, able, and ready to walk in on day one to fulfill that responsibility as commander-in-chief. We have been wasting far too long, both American lives, my brothers and sisters in uniform, as well as trillions of taxpayer dollars on these senseless regime change wars. As president, I'm going to end these regime change wars, work to end this new Cold War, and bring this focus back on dedicating our resources to serving the American people. So I'm going to continue to focus on bringing that message to the American people and to voters and providing them with a choice in who they want to serve as their commander-in-chief.
As we speak, Hurricane Dorian is currently churning in the Caribbean. You were in Puerto Rico recently during the protest against then Governor Ricardo Rosselló. As president, how would you approach Puerto Rico differently than the current administration?
In every way, differently than the current administration.
Would you be in favor
just
of Puerto Rican statehood?
As we were flying into, I want to just address the hurricane that I think has just passed them by, but it's a threat that continues to concern them. As we were flying in to Puerto Rico, I was looking out the window of the airplane that probably half of the homes and buildings that we were flying over still had blue tarps on their rooftops, which just points to the fact that the people of Puerto Rico are still recovering from the last major hurricane that they faced and are now in imminent threat as other hurricanes continue to pose a threat to them. So I think we see a deep-seated issue that we pointed out the last time I spoke to you about corruption within the Puerto Rican government that has done such a great disservice to the people of Puerto Rico. They are standing up and working towards bringing about that change in their own leadership. From a federal perspective, we need to be able to dedicate the kinds of resources necessary to be able to help Puerto Rico begin to rebuild in a way that is sustainable and long-lasting.
Would you be in favor of Puerto Rican statehood?
That's for the Puerto Rican people to decide. If the people of Puerto Rico decide that that's the direction that they want to take, then I would support that.
Very quickly, in our final minute, you've been called the most anti-war candidate in the 2020 race. Are there any U.S. wars that you would continue to fight as president?
The war against al-Qaeda and ISIS, these terrorist groups that continue to pose a threat to the safety and security of the American people, whether it is a terrorist entity or another country. If you directly threaten the American people, then that is a threat that we need to address. However, my strong stance has been against these counterproductive regime change wars that have been counter to our national security interests. They've strengthened terrorist groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda. They have taken thousands of my brothers and sisters in uniforms' lives, and they have cost the American people dearly. Every time we hear about people in Flint being poisoned by their water, there's news of more communities and children being poisoned by lead in their water. This is a direct failure of not dedicating our resources towards our health and well-being of our people and instead squandering them on these wasteful regime change wars. This is why I'm running for president, to bring about this sea change in our foreign policy so we can put the American people first.
Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Elaine.